Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to more live action from the caterhamracer.com Caterham 420R series, racing in a lockdown world whilst we wait for the real motorsport season to get underway later this season. As you can see on screen, it is going to be a race at Brands Hatch tonight, and you've just seen our first race winner of the evening. Jaroslav Cherny has just picked up the first win in Grid B, and he has done so ahead of Ben Buckley by around about 11.5 seconds, with Mike Hilton rounding out the top three, then Tom McEwing and Darren Holdcroft. But we are here at the Brands Hatch Indy circuit, or the virtual version, just up the road from me personally, around 15-20 minutes away in Kent. It is one of the best circuits in the world, not just in the UK, and it is the Indy circuit that we're using rather than the full GP layout, as to mimic what would have been the original full Caterham 7 UK Championship calendar, because there has been a name change from 420R to 7 UK. And so, just to reaffirm how the format of the evening is going to go once more, as you may have seen at Snetterton on Monday, it's going to be a 3-race format in many cases for tonight. We are going to have another Grid B race, but that race is going to have a little bit more significance than this first race, and that is simply because we are going to have whoever wins this second race will then join the back of the Grid A standings for race number 2. There is the result, and this is how the evening is looking to go. So once again, we have pre-qualification all throughout this week, and the top 18 drivers from pre-qualifying have gone through to the main Grid A. That's the main A race, and there'll be 2 races for them later on, but it will also be joined by the winner of this next race, which is the second Grid B race. This is for the overspill, if you like, because we have a few drivers who were outside that top 18 but still wanted the chance to race. So we've given them that, and the ultimate prize is whoever finishes first in this second race will join at the back in the green and black Caterham Motorsports Works livery, effectively. And then it'll be 2 races, once again at 15 minutes each. And of course, we're heading towards the tail end of the season as we get through the season itself. Scott Woodwiss here on commentary. Chris Hutchinson also here as well, but he's busy tapping away and doing all sorts of bits and pieces on the screen that you can see, from making sure everything is ready for things to get going. And he will be jumping on the mic as soon as he's got a moment to do so. Whilst
I am back in the room, Scott. Hello, good evening, everybody.
Oh, he's back in the room. Good stuff. Yeah, so Chris is here then, and one thing we should talk about before this race gets underway is we should talk about how close it's been in practice all the way across this week in the server. And I saw a screenshot from James Wingfield, who we believe should be in this race. He wasn't originally going to race, but he's decided actually that he was going to at the last minute, as maybe a couple of others may be doing as well. But we looked at the screenshot of the server and how close it was, and when we say close, we mean close. I mean, to give you an example, the entire spread of all the times on the server of those who are in the 22-23 drivers that have qualified, the spread was not much over half a second, which, it being a short circuit, granted, but on a fast circuit like this, in cars that are very evenly matched, it just shows that the amount of skill level here, particularly on show tonight, is going to be quite immense when you've got so many cars in such a small time gap. There's half a second between 23 cars. It's going to be incredibly frantic around here tonight.
Yep, definitely, that's one word for it, frantic. And yeah, with such a short lap and with very little difference between the cars, overtaking is going to be at a premium, and hopefully they will behave themselves and work together to make those overtakes happen. Again, I don't think we'll see them necessarily finishing in one corner. We might see that dragging on. But yeah, a nice grid of, I think, around 14, 15 cars for our Grid B. Here come the lights.
They certainly do. So our first of 3 races we're going to show you tonight. This is race number 2 for Grid B. Remember, winner of this goes to the back of Grid A for their first race later on. 6 red lights in the middle of the screen. Cherny on pole. Buckley alongside him. Who's going to win the sprint to Paddock Hill Bend? Well, it's not going to be Cherny, I don't think, because it's a cracking start from Ben Buckley from the outside of the front row. He will sweep across into the lead as they head into Paddock Hill Bend. Cherny in second place. Well, that could be third as McEwing looks to go round the outside of Paddock Hill Bend, and that's a brave move going at full speed. So up the hill, under the bridge, and into Druids for the first time. And Buckley dives for the apex as they head through the hairpin at the top of the hill, through 180 degrees, and then they plunge downhill towards Graham Hill Bend. So Cherney down to third from what was pole position. Looks has a little dive up the inside to try and get back past McEwing for second. The one thing we should mention is that the track limits in particular at Graham Hill Bend, in real life, if drivers kept on triggering the trackside cameras, they'd be getting multiple penalties and warnings from the stewards. In the sim, Chris, it's a little bit more lenient. Of course, you have been very strict on drivers to say you can use a little bit more of the road, but don't take the mickey on it. But in many cases, they're going to have to try and behave a little better, as we see Cherney now looking back up the inside for McEwing for second place into Paddock Hill Bend. Does he get the move done? He does. And second he goes, and it's too much for Tom McEwing and Darren Hallcroft. Both of them sideways into Paddock Hill Bend, and it hasn't worked out for McEwing. He's been shuffled off, and he exits stage right into the gravel trap at the bottom of Paddock Hill Bend. As I was going to ask you, Chris, the track limits, you've been very strict on them to say you can lose a little bit more on the exit of Graham Hill Bend here, but don't start taking liberties with it. But even so, drivers are going to be looking to at least push the limits of what's possible on a short circuit like this, with a track that's normally quite strict on track limits in real life.
Yeah, drivers are going to be drivers, aren't they? So they will take as much liberty as they can, and the game does give them that leniency. So let's see how well behaved they are. I think it's also worth pointing out that we've got Ian Payne today joining us. He had joined us earlier in the year, and he's back to join again. And it looks like these two, so the Ian Payne and Jaroslav Cherney, will be the two to sort of go for this win. But at the moment, Ben Buckley is doing a great job holding that gap at the lead.
Yeah, it was the cracking start from the front row that managed to get him the lead. Ian Payne, for those who want a bit of insight into him, he is one of, if not the main man at PT Motorsport, and they run Fun Cup cars as well as Caterhams, several Caterhams at that. And he certainly is quite handy both in the sim and also in real life. I've seen him contending for victories on multiple occasions. He's going to have to go some to catch the top two to contend for victory in this first race on our stream. And Jaroslav Černý, who is quite familiar with these cars, and particularly in the sim, because he was the man who developed the physics for these Caterhams, so he knows them better than anyone else. Case in point, slotting up the inside through McLaren to get through back into the lead. So from what could have, where he lost the lead and bogged down at the start, Chris, didn't take him very long to slip back up the inside of Ben Buckley, back into the lead. And you'd expect now, with the pace he's been setting so far this evening, to possibly start driving away, unless Ben Buckley has anything to say about that.
Yeah, Ben just drifted a little bit wide going around the McLaren, just opened up that opportunity, and it didn't take very much to invite him up the inside, and off he went. If the form guide is true now, he will scamper, but can Ian Payne throw a spanner in that works with trying to get past? He's obviously looking on the outside of Surtees. That's going to be a brave move if it happens. It didn't happen this time.
Now, we were talking about just before stream is that particularly when you look at the corners on this circuit, as Ian Payne looks to the outside again, he'd be looking for the cutback that Černý didn't really get. He managed to pull himself alongside with a very simple move up the inside line, but Payne is really tucked underneath to get the roll cage of Buckley as they head back down the pit straight, looking towards Paddock Hill Bend once again to start another lap, as Černý puts in the fastest lap of the race at 52.654. We were mentioning, as I'll get to my point in a second, because Ian Payne is going for another move. This time he does do the switchback on the run towards Druids, has the inside line and reaches the apex first and second place. As I was saying, we were talking about the fact that Brands Hatch is a circuit, particularly in these cars, where, and it's not often you say this for most circuits, apart from arguably Surtees coming up here, although you can try and pass, every single corner here is a very plausible overtaking opportunity when you go through. And so it means you've got to pick your moment. And you were talking about the fact that in your racing career you have effectively made a pass at every single corner on this track in Caterhams. But there are some, for the most part, you can make passes, but there's no such thing as an easy passing spot here. It's kind of, if you're going to make a pass, you need to set it up properly. And once you have made a pass, you know that you've earned it, because it's not easy to get around something.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I absolutely have made a overtake at least once on every single corner around Brands Hatch, and plenty of other people will. Caterham makes that possible, but it's actually a very easy track for a driver to defend at. Although when I say easy, it's relentless, as you can hear by the amount of difficulty we have making points while still commentating on the action. It really is relentless as a track, and as a driver you feel the same way as well. There's very little opportunity to sort of have a break, but it's a great track for manoeuvring drivers. And again, you might see people from two corners out just manoeuvring the car in front to have to protect their inside, for example, which then means you don't get the run out the corner, and that's where the overtakes are generated from.
It's almost a little bit like ESPs, kind of just sort of almost psychically talking to the driver to make a mistake, and a couple of corners later he set him up to run wide or to going to switch back up the inside. The race is, in its early part, just calmed down a little bit now. It's still churny from Payne and from Buckley. This is 4th, 5th and 6th. This is Darren Holdcroft ahead of this man, Mike Hilton. And then we've got Alan Curtis just behind in 6th position. Albert Weyer is 7th, and Tom McEwing, who was up there as high as 2nd place at one point, briefly, was the man that scattered off into the gravel at Paddock Hill Bend at the start of lap 2. He's now back up to 8th position, ahead of Richard Groom and Graham Hopkins. In fact, Hopkins was 11th, but he's now was 10th, couldn't get the words out. But then he got passed by Jim Earlham, and now he's just ahead of Coomber in 12th position. So after the initial sort of skirmishes, we've just hit a bit of a lull period here, but you just sense with Caterham there is usually a bit of an air in the circuit, an atmosphere that just in case someone makes a move, it can kick off at any time. Case in point, again, Ben Buckley somehow has made a mistake and dropped away from 3rd place, possibly if he's run wide or tried to make a repass on Payne. But he's dropped back down to 6th, and I guess we didn't see it on camera, but the big question is on that, I suppose, Chris, did he jump or was he pushed in that?
I think from the gaps I was seeing before, I think it was definitely a self-made thing there. It's very easy to draw yourself out wide there and also lose the back end of this particular Caterham around Clark Curve and around Clearways. So it's I would put money on the fact he's just put that in there himself, had a play in the sandpit.
Someone else having a play on the grass looks to be Alan Curtis, and he decided to have a play in the barriers now because he's managed to clatter it on the exit of Graham Hill Bend heading up towards Surtees on the Cooper Straight. So that's now let Ben Buckley gain 1 position back, and Curtis has now dropped back down to 8th because he's dropped behind Weyer and Queuing. Now this is the view from Mike Hilton. He's in the tow. He's looking for the final podium spot here. It won't get him through to grid B, but it might at least get him some bragging rights. So he looks to the outside. And he's getting very risky with the outside track limits there, but he is looking for the switchback to try and carry the speed all the way through to the exit, and it might have worked as he dives up the inside under the bridge and into Druids. And for a moment there I thought it was going to end in disaster, Chris, but somehow Mike Hilton's pulled that one back and he's back through into 3rd place, and I have to say that was a very well set up move indeed.
I think I would have been a bit scared had I gone out that wide, but nevertheless he maintained the track position and then was able to make that switch back. Obviously if you go out that wide you have got a nice run through the middle of the corner without risking running out wide, so yeah, I'm not sure I'd do that every lap, but it worked for him that time.
He who dares wins, as Dale Boy once said. So, and he certainly dared on that move, and certainly won in 3rd place. Now the trouble is, he is 9 seconds behind 2nd place. He was a further 3.4 seconds back from the leader, Cherney. So I can't quite see Mike Hilton, unless something happens, touch wood, to the top 2, getting any higher than 3rd place. And there's always a risk that if his pace does start to drop off, you might come under threat from both Darren Holdcroft and also the recovering Ben Buckley, who we just spotted in the background in the turquoise-coloured Caterham back in 5th position. Further back in the pack, this is a nice equal battle between Alan Curtis, who had the spin exiting Graham Hill Bend, and he's now under threat from Richard Groom. He's not a Caterham racer himself, but he does own one in this particular colour scheme, white with the sort of black striping down the middle. And he does drive that on track days mostly, but he's joined the series to test his skills in the sim in a race situation, and so far coping pretty well. And on the tail of Alan Curtis on the run towards Cooper Straight now, he tries to have a sneak up the inside. He was certainly trying to prise open the door, but as we talked about, Surtees is arguably the hardest place to make a pass because it's such a narrow run through there. It's not impossible, you can make a move if you pull alongside him quick enough. And now he gets a little sideways on the exit as he puts the power down the 2-litre Duratec engine down the straight. So Groom doing well in 9th place to keep in the tow, and he's one of a few drivers in the field, both in the A and B grids, Chris, who don't race themselves, either because they're sim racers or have Caterhams but don't race them, but they seem to have adapted to the sim world pretty quickly. And so those who are quite adept in many cases to maybe how a Caterham feels, as we see, it looks like is Kuma's had an issue there that's had a spin. They seem to be taking to it pretty quickly, and it doesn't seem as though these Caterhams have that much of a steep learning curve to get to grips with.
Yeah, certainly you can jump in one of these things and they feel, especially if you drive one. Anyway, there's Ian getting very squirrely around there. But yeah, you can definitely adapt to driving it in the simulator relatively quickly. As ever, though, to get up initially up to speed is fairly straightforward. It's just finding those fast last few tenths or second even. That's where things start getting even more tricky.
Well, Ian Payne is he's finding it tricky, speaking of which, to close this gap down, because it's gone back up to 4.1, nearly 4.2 seconds. And as we know, for those who follow Caterham Racing and also Fun Cup, because as we say, PT Sports Cars do run a Fun Cup car as well, he's not the slowest person out there, but certainly he's a man who knows pretty much the physics of these Caterhams up the back of his hand. So making the most of that advantage to run on. He's running one of the sort of default assigned liveries. So he's got, it was given at random Jack Sales' livery, and he took that to a pretty high position in the championship at one point in the last couple of years. And whilst Jack doesn't race at the moment, he's certainly someone who knew how to pedal a Caterham pretty quickly to players like Brands Hatch. It's good to see that livery out in front once more. He's just coming up to put a lap on that looks to me as if that's possibly Hopkins or Coomer, I think, one of the two. He turns his way up through Sturties and into McLaren, and then out through the long right-hander of Clearways to put him back onto the Jack Brabham straight. So 3.5 minutes to go, and it's certainly going to be interesting if it stays like this, Chris, to see how the man who, as we say, knows the physics of this car and effectively then knows this car, particularly in the sim world, off by heart, how he gets on against the drivers who've been racing it all season against each other, because he will certainly be, as a phrase I like to use, the proverbial cat amongst the pigeons if he can make some work through the field to get himself into mid-pack by the opening couple of laps, if possible.
He's still going through his sort of verification process, if you like, on the server. He's only joined us recently, and one of those things is you have to have raced with us on our B grid successfully, and he's certainly putting the success into that, isn't he? So eventually he'll be able to qualify with everyone else through pre-qualification and probably be on the A grid to start with, where he belongs. But equally, the A grid there is a definite step up in the speeds there. So it will be interesting to see how he gets on.
Well, certainly getting on just fine at the moment. 2.5 minutes to go in this second B grid race, and at the moment, all signs pointing to Jaroslav Cherney making his way onto the back of the B grid, or the A grid, and he will jump into the factory colours of green and black at the back of the field. There's Ben Buckley, just getting past one of the back markers. He has caught up to Darren Holdcroft as they head down the pit straight and up towards paddock once more. Still remaining in 5th position. They turn their way through the plunging right-hander, and Buckley again just getting a little ragged as he dips a wheel on the inside and just backs the car sideways almost into the corner. But he's on the rear of Holdcroft now as we ride on board with Buckley. Just squares off the apex at Druids, then heads down back to the right hand side of the circuit, brakes in a straight line, and doesn't use that much curb ring. And actually, he's being rather sensible. So ironically, in some cases, Chris, I think either your instructions haven't fallen on deaf ears, or they're just being a bit more careful. But it seems as though some of these drivers are actually taking better care of track limits than some of their real-world counterparts are.
It must have been an absolute mistake. I can't believe he did it deliberately. But yeah, and actually, if you get the line absolutely right, you don't need to use all that curb. Really, to use all that curb, it's more of a mistake, or you're just relying on it being there. But with only 1 minute and 20 to go, this is the closest battle on the track, but only maybe a couple more laps for the leader to complete. And Buckley cutting up the inside of Darren Holdcroft, making a good move. He's obviously got the speed, he just hasn't yet got the consistency of lap time and line to really compete up there full time.
And he did only join a few races ago, so he hasn't completed the whole season, but he's certainly getting to grips with both the Academy and the 420R cars. He's been adjusting to both, and as though that they are two very different animals. The Academy offers less grip, it offers less power, it's a little more nervous, and so it's not really as drivable in some cases as the 420R, because the Caterham Academy car runs performance sort of road spec tyres, whereas the 420Rs run a semi-slick. So two different types of performances that's there. But of course, the man that programmed it all, Jaroslav Cherney, is out in front and knows exactly how all that works. So 27 seconds left to go. Whether this will be the last lap or not, we'll have to wait and see. He did finish the first race with the time ticking to 0 just as he was coming onto the Jack Brabham straight. Now I think he might just have the same scenario again as he heads up through Surtees into McLaren, Clearways, and then Clark Curve onto the pit straight. And I think this will be the last lap. So for a man who's spent quite a lot of time developing these cars, he sure knows how to drive them at least. He heads up towards the checkered flag, and Jaroslav Cherney books himself onto grid A for race number 1 for the evening tonight. Second place will go to Ian Payne, 4.7 seconds back. And all due respect to Cherney, if Jaroslav hadn't been there, he would have almost certainly secured that for himself. Now, Mike Hilton will come through in 3rd place. There he is, coming across the line to check the checkered flag. And it will be 4th place to Ben Buckley eventually, who did break away by about a second and a bit from Alan Holdcroft, who rounds out the top 5. 6th place will go to Tom McEwing, who hasn't come on screen just yet. That's one of our back markers. That McEwing is under threat from Albert Vea as they come towards the checkered flag, but McEwing holds him off. And I think McEwing might possibly feel that more could have come from that race had he not made that mistake at Paddock Hill Bend. Alan Curtis comes through in 8th position, Jim Earlham 9th, and we're just waiting for Richard Groom, who crosses the line as the last person to take the checkered flag as he takes the last spot in the top 10. So, eventful starts to that race, Chris, but after the initial sort of big moves were made and the big errors were made, it all seemed to calm down a little bit, and pretty much, as it was in race 1, just jumping back into the lead after a poor start, driving away from the front and just making no mistakes. A very simple but effective race there from Cherney to book his place on grid 8.
Absolutely, and judging by the performance and the sort of the run of form, that was definitely the winner that I would have called before. But yeah, it's one thing calling it beforehand, it's another thing actually putting it to play. So well done to Yaroslav, Ian Payne there in 2nd, Mike Hilton 3rd. So it's time for us to go and join the A grid. So in the meantime, if I could, maybe we could talk people through the results we've had so far.
We certainly can. This is how the series has played out. This is our penultimate race meeting of the season, and it all started back on the Silverstone International Circuit. And you look at the first half of the season, and it was mostly dominated by Harry Senior. 4 wins in a row with 2 doubles at Silverstone International, and then at Snetterton 300. And then the form book started to change. Not Hill saw Matthew Lewis pick up a brace. He was the first person to win a race other than Senior in the series, but Harry still got 2 podium finishes, 2 second places, crucially. Steve McMaster picked up his first victory and Matthew Lewis a 3rd at the next round at Zandvoort on the newly amended Zandvoort Grand Prix circuit. Then we went to Thruxton where we had 2 very exhilarating races, 1 or 2 incidents, 1 or 2 mad moments in some cases, but it was Harry Senior back to winning ways with a 5th win and then Steve McMaster picking up his 2nd. So far we've only had 3 different race winners. Whether or not we'll get the chance for at least a 4th remains to be seen, but it's Brands Hatch here tonight, and then the finale, and very much a driver's favourite, being, of course, Donington Park National Circuit. So we're heading back into our server, and we magically pop in from Group B to Group A, and here are our drivers on track, and there's Steve McMaster. Now he's in, well, effectively now his proper permanent livery, and anyone who is a Le Mans enthusiast may certainly recognise his livery, because if you look carefully, this is pretty much a replica of what was Ken Miles's Ford GT40 livery, the really faint, what I like to call duck egg blue, with the white stripes down the middle, and those 2 little green fenders mean the 2 red bits. Green? What am I talking about? I'm always colourblind. Red wings on the front of that car, excuse me, were effectively mimicking the red parts of the colour scheme around the headlights. So that is what you're seeing there. McMaster currently 3rd fastest, and putting that livery to very good use indeed. Fastest on top of the times is, well, who else could it be but this man, Harry Senior. He's looking for win number 6 tonight, at least. David Rowe, who's been very quick in the server already this week, is 2nd fastest as we come towards the end of qualifying. There's only about 3.5 minutes to go here. Then we see Matthew Lewis in 4th fastest, Guy Crawford again looking very strong as well in 5th position, Tom Willis 6th, and Chris Bates up there in 7th with Paul Fernhoff. Andy Lees is good to see him back, and Mark Bennett. And looking at the rest of the field, apart from any person we're waiting for, of course, or who should be in, is of course Jaroslav Cherney, but he will not take part in this qualifying session, because it means that it ensures that he will start at the back of the grid. In fact, there he is in pit lane, waiting patiently, and his practice/qualifying has already been 2 full races, so he's more than ready to get us up on the back of the grid. This is Matthew Lewis, the onboard view from him as he looks to try and find a bit more pace to push himself a little higher up. But the thing he points out, which is fairly obvious if you look at the timing pylon, Chris, the top 15 is covered by just under 6/10 of a second. It was a little bit closer in practice across a slightly larger spread of drivers, but even so, it's pretty phenomenal how close it is, and that should hopefully set the tone for just how close the race is going to be hopefully as clean as possible, but it should be hopefully a good nose-to-tail battle between several drivers up at the front.
Yeah, there we saw Matthew Lewis just missing out on pole where he's got to move himself up into second, just ahead of David Rowe. But absolutely, the first three there covered by 7/100ths of a second, just like it is in real life, really. So, simulator again mimicking that thing. We often see gaps that are this tiny. And that's one of the reasons it's so difficult to overtake. There is just no performance difference between the top guys. But great job there by Matthew as we rode on board with a nice tidy lap. We've got someone ahead running wide, not sure who that was. But yeah, great job.
Another lap doesn't appear to be affected too much. Here's Blair McConaughey in 8th position. Now, one thing I found out just before the broadcast started, there's a video he's got on his YouTube channel where it's of him in his academy car setting what he, and I guess everyone else has to believe, is the fastest time set by a Caterham academy car in championship spec around the Nürburgring Nordschleife. He did an 8 minutes 19 in that car, and even with a little bit of traffic in amongst, I think there was a couple of BMWs in his way. But he still managed a very impressive time, so the Scot certainly putting all that driving talent to good use. And again, he was someone who competed in last year's Academy, of course, and was runner-up. He and Tom Willis, who mainly races the Academy cars in between the two series. He finished second to him in that side. But it has been interesting if we compare him to his other Academy drivers in the mix, is that he's actually turned out of the top three drivers, because the other driver, James Fowler, has also been part of the Academy series here on caterhamracer.com, that ironically, even though he was second in the championship in real life, he's been the one that's mastered the virtual Caterhams better than the other two. So who knows, if this had been a proper virtual championship, things might have been the other way around between the top two. Yeah,
it's great to see the battle from the real world translate into the simulator world. I mean there's nothing better than that, and as soon as we get out going for real in sort of the next month or so, I'm sure they'll continue with glee when they get into the real circuit racing.
Yeah, that's there might be a graphic we might be able to show you very briefly before we get race one underway, and which shows a reminder of where we're going to be heading for our Caterham series in real life after, of course, the situation that's been going on around the world, which we can't name on YouTube, otherwise they ping us for mentioning what we shouldn't mention. But it looks as though everything appears to be on course to get things started again at July. So Harry Senior thinks, right, qualifying session over, into the time barrier. Checkered flag goes out on the qualifying session, and it does put Harry Senior on pole position, but as Chris rightly pointed out, it's only by the very narrow margin of 24 1,000ths of a second. We've had race finishes so far across the two series that have been closer than that combined, so that should be quite enticing. So Harry Senior then will be starting race number one on pole position with Matthew Lewis alongside him. Where have we seen that before? We've seen it plenty of times. It's going to happen all over again. More usual suspects towards the front. David Rowe and Steve McMaster on the second row of the grid. Tom Willis with his final lap, we saw just popping in there with his final lap of the session, will start in 5th position alongside Guy Crawford. Then Chris Bates and Blair McConaughey, and then Paul Fernerhoff and the Belgian sim racer Tim Van Hee back once again. He has qualified in 10th. And then as it starts to transition over into the race session, 11th fastest on the grid on the 6th row is going to be the German 2020 Academy driver Dominique Mansberger, and he starts alongside Mark Bennett in P12, Andy Lees and James Fowler on row 7. Then it's Steve Arnell, and once again James Murphy not really on pace, but then again he has just come in straight away from driving his real Caterham at Snetterton, I believe, this afternoon. So I did see in the Discord server, he literally came home, said hi to his family for 3 minutes, and then jumped straight back onto the sim to get himself ready for tonight. So he's back in 16th place. And then we've got Paul Marsh, and then what should be then Jaroslav Cherny, who will be line up alongside him. Not Chris, unfortunately, because he'll be controlling the cameras and up here in the com box with B. So 18 cars getting set to go. And we can talk about it for ages, but we'll talk about the race in a second. Here is what we should be expecting this season for our revised calendars for the Caterham Championships. If you're an Academy driver, your season starts it's at Alton Park, which I rightly said last time when we were looking through this. What I did get wrong was that your second race, I then said, was going to be at Alton Park, but it's not, it's Cadwell Park, because my brain is stupid. So Alton Park on 18th of July is where the Academy will start first. These are drivers who have never raced before in real life and only just got their racing licences at the beginning of the year. So Alton Park first on the 18th of July, then Cadwell Park on the 1st of August, Thruxton on August 23rd. That's quite a circuit and a half to take the Academy drivers, one of their first races. Then for the first time in a while, we've got a double header for the Academy. First time I can remember, because of the situation going on. So there'll be 2 races across the weekend at Brands Hatch here, 26th and 27th of September. Then the final championship round will be at Donington on the Saturday, 17th of October, and the 18th will be the Awesome Trophy. And then quickly for the Road Sport 270s, 310s and 7 UKs, because they've gained UK national status through Motorsport UK, it's Cadwell Park first, then Thruxton, then Brands Hatch, then Donington, then the last rounds on 31st of October at Snetterton. So that's what we can expect. And hopefully no changes going forwards if things continue to improve in the real world. So 9 rows of Caterhams, 18 in total, 2 15-minute races, the first of which coming up very shortly. And once again, Chris, I can't really look anywhere beyond the first 3 rows for somebody who could potentially win this race. But putting a bet on someone, I think, is a rather foolish thing indeed, because on the fast circuit like Brands Hatch, with the time gap between drivers being so close across so many, it's hard, almost impossible to even put money on picking a winner.
Some racecraft's definitely going to come in here, as well as maybe some luck as well. I don't think that can be overstated on a grid like this, so close, and not being involved in someone else's accident. But certainly some racecrafts, the way for the wily drivers to manoeuvre people around, will be useful as we're going up and around Druids and around all these famous bends. It's great to be out racing on Brands this evening.
And there'll be some daring moves taking place. To borrow a line from Brian Jones, who's going to go high, wide and handsome into Paddock Hill Bend. We'll find out very shortly. Red lights are coming on any second now for the first of 2 races for the caterhamracer.com Caterham 420R series. Senior on pole, Lewis alongside in the front row, who will win the run towards turn 1. It's a short run towards the first corner. They get away cleanly. No one really bogging down too much, and it's Senior who slots in just in front of Matthew Lewis. It's already looking around back into Senior's Caterham into Paddock Hill Bend. They turn in down through the hill, and it is the Senior already defending from Lewis on the run up towards the first corner. Miracle of miracles, through Paddock Hill at least, they've all got through cleanly. David Rowe thinks I'm going for the lead on the outside at Druids, and goes for second at least, getting around the outside of Lewis. So that's now up into 4th place Steve Master in his Ford GT40 tribute livery. 5th is now Tom Willis, and 6th is now Chris Bates, his BMW art car inspired livery that he's running in real life a few times. Up through Surtees, and up now through Clearways, McLaren, and then Clark Curve to end the first lap. And it looks like the top 5 are trying to break away, but they haven't got away too quickly. And now David Rowe's got a super exit through Clark Curve and trying to put alongside him the side draft on the run towards Paddock Hill Bend. Now, I've seen this from the com box at Brands Hatch so many times, watching Caterhams go side by side. And David Rowe is daring to go around the outside at Paddock Hill Bend if he can pull it off over the curbing, but Harry Senior fights back, and he has the inside line, and Matthew Lewis tries to knock on the door and hold off the second place. Rowe's still not giving up the outside line, but if he can stay there, at least right now for second place, he'll have the inside line for the next corner. Not quite pulling it off, but I have to say, Chris, David Rowe doesn't hang around here, using all his experience in the sim to full advantage, very nearly pulling off what many could consider as an almost impossible move. I've seen it done in Formula Fords, but never Caterhams.
So around the outside of those 2 bends, again, normally you need a train of 3 cars as he tries to sneak up the inside. There is a little bit of contact there. David's gone spinning to the inside, so that has cost him dearly there. A little bit of wheel-to-wheel contact there. The gap he was trying to prise open didn't quite happen, but now we see Matthew Lewis coming up the inside of Harry, coming into Paddock Hill Bend, but he's the right side this time. Can he make it?
Oh, they almost touch wheels. They head into Paddock Hill Bend. The Senior tries to force the issue round the outside, taking that high, wide and handsome line. Behind them, McMaster and Willis are going toe-to-toe for 3rd place. It is 2 by 2.
Just lost Scott there. We're going to grab him back into the commentary box in just a second. 2 by 2 as Steve McMaster actually spins to the inside there. Luckily, no one else got really caught up to. Well, Chris Bates did get caught up in it. I should be getting Scott back in momentarily. Hey, Scott, have you got us? We lost you for a bit.
Couple of laps. Apologies for that. What happened there, unfortunately, we saw both Steve McMaster and I think also Chris Bates both hit stripe in separate incidents. So trying to recover down from what is now unfortunately 16th and 17th, and James Murphy hasn't really moved up from the back of the grid either. So at the moment, some of the front running drivers at this point, Chris, in the early stages, hitting trouble and not really fulfilling their full potential here. So Brands Hatch a circuit that, again, like others, doesn't really allow to take liberties because it bites back pretty hard.
Yeah, it does. Drifting wide out of a corner, not getting your apex, all those kind of things really affect your lap time here. Matthew Lewis going very wide there. But we've got this pair going out front, and they're actually pulled the gap now from the squabbling. A lot of that gap was actually caused by that incident. And like I say, sometimes you just need that bit of luck. And unfortunately, with David putting his wheels up the inside, there just wasn't quite enough room for him to make that move stick.
So he's got lots of work to do, although, and if this stays how it is, he'll have to start from the back of the grid to work his way through. He's done it before in 420Rs and in Academy. He's going to be a tiny bit, I'm sure, and he had a similar situation at Anglesey where he was battling for the lead of the race and second position, made contact with another driver, and unfortunately went spinning, but he had to charge his way back through, and he did get up to as high as around about 6th position, but that was at a circuit like Anglesey on the international layout, which was a little bit longer, whereas Brands Hatch Indy doesn't really offer you that luxury if you're quick enough. So the top two breaking away early doors. They've got a gap of around about 2 seconds. The man that's benefited from all of that is Guy Crawford in the orange Caterham there in 3rd position. He has really found some pace here and is certainly motoring on to get his first podium of the series, and what is only his, I think, total 4th race meeting or so between the two series. So driving incredibly well in the sim, and he's now coming under pressure, ironically, from the 3 drivers from Academy White Group last year. Not in championship order, but he's got Fowler from McConaughey, Woodwiss from Fowler, then McConaughey, and up in 7th place, impressively, ahead of Mark Bennett, is also Tim Van Hee. And also, speaking of impressive, Jaroslav Cherny from the back of the grid has got through all that chaos and is up to 9th place, and on the back of, that looks to be as if that is Mark Bennett. So, incredibly, Cherny's kept clear from all the trouble that's gone around him, inside the top 10. And there's still plenty of time for him to go even higher.
Yeah, we just missed a move for the lead there. You can see Harry is now out front, but Matthew Lewis is fighting down the inside of Surtees again. Oh, that's tight to go around there. You always breathe in, especially if you're in the driver's seat. It's always a nervous time. But Harry is back out in front, although he's gone wide now out of Surtees, and therefore Matthew is back in front. So this battle looks like it's going to rage on and on.
Looks like it, and the key thing was that Senior sensed that Lewis was going to dive back up the inside and get the undercut as he ran wide, so he just slotted in at the right moment behind the new lead car as he now looks to the outside line. He's looking for that undercut to try and make his way through. Again, tries to dart to the inside as Lewis runs over the curve. Behind them, Tom Willis fancies 3rd place. He's going to go up the inside at Druids. The orange Caterham again, he's going to try and brave it out around the outside, but he builds discretion to better part of Valour and just slots in between what is currently Woodwiss and Fowler. And here comes Crawford again, impressively up the inside, bumps over the curb on the inside of Graham Hill Bend. They're going to make it 3 abreast on the run towards Surtees. Crawford in the middle of a sandwich, and it was never going to work with those 3 squeezing together. Round goes Crawford, also round goes Woodwiss. They carry on, but they've lost places to both McConaughey and Tim Van Hee. So McConaughey's up to 4th, and Tim Van Hee's up to 5th position. And here comes Jaroslav Cherny. That's what is now currently 8th position. Could be 7th if he gets a good run through Clark Curve onto the pit straight. Gets his nose in front, and incredibly, Chris, he is up to 7th position. And remind you again, from the back of the grid, and 18th place. So talk about keeping it clean and keeping it tidy. He certainly has done, and it's worked to his advantage.
Yeah,
pretty
clearly the
well.
guest car, the Caterham car, is set up very nicely for him here, and he's made his way through. Again, we've talked about the Red Seas parting before now, and it seems like that might be the same for him. Every time he's approaching a situation, the other drivers are throwing it off all around him.
As the saying says, keep your head whilst everyone around you loses theirs. That's pretty much exactly what Jaroslav has done all race so far. He's actually up to 6th now because Tom Willis has dropped behind both Cherny and Crawford, so a little bit of a mishap there for him. It's a scrap for 3rd place now because James Fowler battling away with Glenn McConaughey and Tim Van Hee just behind him as well. Here is Blair. Harry Senior sets the fastest lap in the race at 51.970. He is motoring along in 2nd place as Lewis continues to lead, and McConaughey a little more confident under brakes into the right-hander and on the brakes up the inside for 3rd position. Fowler tries to defend, but he senses that McConaughey's too far alongside, tries to brave it out around the outside as so many drivers have, but it might just work. Dives up the inside of Graham Hill Bend, but McConaughey's not finished, and they're going to bang wheels on the exit. McConaughey's over the curb, and look at the way Tim Van Hee just arrives on the scene and he's going to try and hoodwink the pair of them. Up into Surtees, and they're side by side again. McConaughey gets elbowed out onto the curb, a bump from Van Hee into the back of Tom Willis's car. McConaughey says, thank you very much for third place, if you don't mind. And back into fourth goes Fowler. Van Hee's in there as well, so it's pretty close for the lead, close for third position, and it's still fairly close, we're at 6th and 7th behind, so plenty of battles up and down the top 10 so far, Chris, in what's been a pretty exhilarating race.
Yeah, you can
thus
see
far.
how those side-by-side moves absolutely just cost you so much time if you don't make the move stick or it doesn't come off. You could see how much Van Hee caught up in while these two are still batting, and they're still side-by-side. And really, this is we see this ripple effect, and that's why it was almost deja vu, wasn't it, with 3 wide trying to go into Surtees again, and we saw how that worked before. A little bit of a tap there from Van Hee. Actually, it kind of helped McConaughey a little bit. Actually, gave him an extra bit of speed going into Graham Hill, and he's now used that to get up the inside of Surtees.
Yeah, a little bit of a speed boost. Inadvertently didn't ask for it. It's almost 3 wide again as Willis goes bounding over the grass on the inside line. McConaughey drifts out wide, and Van Hee now will go attack from Jaroslav Cherny. He's up the inside. He could be third at this point if he plays his cards right. It's 3 abreast for 4th position, and again there's more contact. It looks as though Van Hee pinballs between McConaughey and Cherny. Cherny's up to 5th. Is he going to go for 4th up the inside into Paddock? The answer to that question is no, not yet. But he's now joining the fight amongst Willis, and it's just an ongoing onslaught for the man in third place. He's got McConaughey and Cherny and Van Hee and Crawford and Bennett and possibly Willis all involved as well. They're all stacking up behind him. I think also I can see Paul Fernerhuff is in there as well. Mansberger is about 3.6 seconds back. So you've now currently got, Chris, an incredible situation where I can see about 7 or 8 cars, and they're all dicing for the final podium spot. And 8 into 1 definitely doesn't go, as we both know. With 5.5 minutes to go, how on earth are they going to sort themselves all out?
Yeah, it looks like the first lap of the race, doesn't it? Let alone 5 minutes to go in this race. They've done a great job so far, and as you say, there are a long how many wheels? I can't even do the maths. It's a lot of wheels in that Caterham train. And so far, teaching everyone how to sort of get through the traffic is Cherny.
I make it a 32-wheel Caterham 420R. I think there's 8 cars in that group, 4 wheels each. 8 times 4 is 32. That's quick maths. Anyway, exiting Grove Hill Bend, the leaders head now on towards Surtees, and these two still haven't left each other alone. Lewis is still under threat from Senior, both of which, of course, have won multiple races. But Senior would very much like his 6th, and Lewis, I believe, will be going for his 4th win of the season. So they dive up the inside into the right-hander at Clark Curve, back onto the pit straight. 4.5 minutes left to play here, and still a scrap that continues to rage between these two. These are arguably the 2 fastest men of the championship thus far. And still Senior can't quite find a way through. He's glued onto the rear end of Lewis's Caterham, and whether he's just biding his time here or just looking for a move remains to be seen. He's going for it now. Has a look into Druids, but again just allows Lewis to sweep in front. The speed trap there was about 125 miles per hour, so certainly using all the pace they've got on these 2-litre Duratec engines. As Lewis now continues to absorb all of this pressure, all these relentless attacks from Harry Senior, I think it's still kicking off behind for third place. There's been a switch for 4th between Fowler and Van Hee, so Fowler back up to 4th now. Cherny's back in 6th. He's now under the pressure from Guy Crawford, and then Bennett and Fernerhuff in there as well. So all sorts going on and not much time left, Chris.
It's really... I'm going to struggle. I wish I had multi-cameras to bring you so I could bring you both battles all at once, but I guess we've really got to look at this race. This is for the win, so it's an important factor for both of these guys. Like you say, kind of the quality of this race season in consistency. We've seen other drivers be able to be up with them, and certainly Steve McMaster and David Rowe are amongst those, but they sometimes have just seen that little bit of inconsistency where these two have always been up front.
Just looked at the lap times as the cars were going across there whilst we were looking at this lead battle, and the difference in lap time, everyone was in the 52s, but it was anywhere between low to mid to high 52s. Drivers' lap times are very much in the same sort of range of around about half a second to 6/10, and this is a very close range. We see this is now Van Hee under threat from Cherny, who in turn is under threat from Crawford, who in turn is under threat from Bennett. So Crawford back to go for what is currently 5th position, and Crawford runs a little wide, looking down the outside goes Bennett. He goes for a move in that grey and red Caterham. He runs wide on the apex of the McLaren through Clark Curve. He will try and regain momentum. It might give him a little bit of a slingshot as they come onto the Jack Brabham straight. What's interesting enough is that both McConaughey and Fowler have started to break away, so the battle now really is between Van Hee and Cherny here. Speed trap again, 121.3 miles per hour. I think the fastest speed we've had is on the right hand side there, 125.3, and that will most likely be in the toe with an optimum exit from
maybe even a missed braking point, Scott. True. You know, that always comes into play at the end of that straight.
Yeah, certainly does. I mean, if you miss your braking point even by half a metre, it can spell disaster and send you straight off into the gravel trap and paddock, so be careful. This is now David Rowe, who, along with Steve McMaster, is kind of working a bit of a tag team job here, because they're both trying to work their way back up the order, and they've made it up to 10th and 11th respectively. So they're McMaster's just in the top 10. Rowe is on the fringe, so they've been the master of this, coming through the cutback, no pun intended, because it's been Steve McMaster in 10th position. Vernehoff is there. Meanwhile, for the lead, with a minute and a half to go, this time it is Lewis's turn to go defensive on the inside as Senior looks for that undercut, but still, Lewis knows where to place his car in all the right places at all the right times. Senior's quite a smart driver. He's not going to simply make a dive up the inside last minute and try and catch Lewis unawares, only to find he makes contact and ruins both their races. He knows exactly where he needs to set him up, with only about a minute and 10 left to go. And I think this has been quite a calculated drive from both of them, but I sense that Senior, Chris, is probably just setting up Lewis a little bit here, just trying to look for the optimum moment as they're going to come on to what I think should be the second to last, if not the last lap of the race. And I figure that Senior's been setting him up for a few laps here. Maybe he's going to choose this time to
I think we've got another lap to go beyond this one. They just came over the line there in time. He's certainly had a few laps now, watching where Matthew's strong and where he's not. We've seen that defensive line from Matthew there, pulling it across the Harry. And as you get more defensive, if one of those defensive moves goes wrong, then you open yourself for the other driver having a run on you. So coming into these last two laps, it's definitely going to be exciting to see where this one goes. We've just seen a change in between McConaughey and Fowler. Again, they're never apart on track, are they? They're stuck together, and they are again today. Coming towards the final lap, I think, unless something goes very wrong, they should have one more to go.
So let's wait and see. Up in towards Clearways and Clark, McLaren and Clark, they'll go for the last time. There's 10 seconds left. Going to be close. It might be the checkered flag now, or it might be one more lap across the line. 4, 3, 2, 1. They just got across the line with one more lap to go, and it must have been less than a second before the timer hit 0. And now Senior knows this time he has to make the move. It's either this lap or never. They'll have to wait towards race 2 if he's going to make this one happen. They're going to be side by side again, and Senior thinks this time, right, I'm braving out around the outside. Lewis shows him the curve on the edge of the road, but if Senior can stay there and dive up the inside, I believe will be his into Graham Hill bend. Lewis defends. There's going to be a touch of wheels. There isn't, but Lewis runs wide onto the AstroTurf. Senior stays there. This may well be a photo finish to get the cameras ready. It could be neck and neck for the line. Into Surtees for the final time. Senior is looking for that win, but so is Lewis. They're both multiple-time race winners. They want to add one more to their collection, but who's going to get it? Out of McLaren through Clark Kerr for the last time. Lewis is in front, but Senior has the toe. The two of them up towards the checkered flag. Who's it going to be? Senior will move out. He is side by side to the line, but Lewis just gets him at the flag. So Lewis does hold on for that race 1 victory. Second place for Harry Senior. Now for third place, here comes McConaughey and Fowler. McConaughey does hold on for his first podium. Fowler is 4th. Jaroslav Cherny from the back of the grid is 5th. What a drive it was from the Czech driver. 6th for the Belgian Tom Vanhey. And then we have Guy Crawford 7th, Paul Fernhout 8th. Steve McMaster and David Rowe do recover to 9th and 10th. So obviously not where they wanted to be, but it's a best case scenario in what was certainly damage limitation for the rest of that race. 11th for James Murphy, 12th for James Murphy, forgive me, just behind Dominic Mansberger, the German. Then we've got Steve Arnell and Mark Bennett and Tom Willis, who I'm sure would have liked a bit more from that race. He was down in 15th position. And then Andy Lees, Paul Marsh, who debuted in the Academy earlier on this week. And then unfortunately the last driver was Chris Bates. So very frantic first race, but hopefully we'll get more of the same of that in race 2 coming up very shortly. There's the confirmation of the result. Matthew Lewis holds on to the victory by 47 1/1000ths of a second. That's how close it was practically all race. Both of them also dipping underneath a 16-minute race time, so pretty quick for them. Then we have Blair McConaughey, 3rd. I think that's his first podium, possibly overall, in either Academy or 420Rs. So good effort from Blair. Certainly all that hot lapping around the Nordschleife seems to help pretty much. James Fowler, 4th. Jaroslav Cherny, that's one of the drives of the races of the night, at least so far. Not only winning both races in Grid B, but also charging up to 5th from the back of the field. Well, fantastic drive. Tim Van Hees 6th, then Guy Crawford 7th, and then Paul Fernhoff, Steve McMaster and David Rowe. McMaster and Rowe certainly would have hoped to be a little higher up had it not been for their mishaps. Mansberger 11th, James Murphy again, not making the progress he would have wanted from towards the rear of the field. He'll certainly start mid-pack, up some more places in race 2 coming up. 13th for Steve Arnell, 14th for Mark Bennett, then Tom Willis, who again should have been higher but made mistakes, then Lees, Marsh and Bates. Just when we get a chance to have a breather, at least not to have a breather, we're straight back into race 2. But I think if race 1's anything to go by, I'm expecting possibly 15 more minutes of very breathless racing where the action, Chris, was entirely non-stop from start to finish.
It's absolutely relentless, isn't it? And again, in real life, it's just like that. I think it's worth pointing out that it takes an incredible amount of concentration, skill and experience to do what these guys are doing, which is running side by side with what is relatively little contact, the concentration levels needed. As much as it is hard for us to talk it through, I can promise you that the drivers are working equally as hard to bring you this show.
I think the phrase that's been said over the last couple of weeks where esports has taken over the motorsport world, the cars might not be real, but the performance and indeed the racing absolutely is. The competition is real, the racing is real, and therefore the action is definitely real. So Matthew Lewis this time will take his turn on pole position, and last time it was a fairly decent start for Harry Senior from the inside of the front row, which is actually where the racing line is. Now, what I know from real life, and I've seen this before in TCR UK in particular, is that the left-hand side of the pit straight is flatter than the right-hand side. It's a little bit more flatter, a bit more of a plateau, whereas the left-hand side, at least well, driver's right, but as you look at it on the screen, it'll be our left, is a little bit sort of slanted on pole position, where the flat surface for the other side of the front row, in turn, I've seen it in reality, in theory, and in actual practical terms, can give and does give a better start at times depending on the launch. So now that Senior is on the other side of the circuit, do we think maybe he might get a better start, or is it maybe just a case of who can hit the revs at the right point just when?
Because we've got a staggered grid here rather than the side-by-side that a traditional Caterham race might have. It's definitely, Harry is in the absolute prime spot. In real life, we think fourth or so on the grid is absolutely the right place to be. You often see the driver from fourth getting a launch just because of that flat, rather than your wheels spinning and you sort of having to deal with the hill. Yep, you absolutely just get fired off there. So it looks like in the absolutely ideal spot there to make a run going into turn 1.
Well, certainly be brave to see if he can make a run. I think things to watch out for, certainly, apart from the top 3, watch out for the green and black Caterham of Jaroslav Cherny, because he is now starting in 5th. Remember, he qualified for this race by winning the second race in Grid B, then drove through all the mayhem in the early stages to get up to 5th position. There's his view, much higher up the grid than he was in race number 1. Other drivers to keep an eye out on, just inside the top 10, rather, both Steve McMaster and David Rowe. They are starting 9th and 10th respectively. And also watch for James Murphy back in 12th. 3 very quick drivers out of position and hopefully can work their way through if fortunes work in their favour. So the lights are about to come on for race number 2. Is it going to be a double once again for Matthew Lewis, or is Senior going to split honours evenly between the two of them? Who's going to win the sprint towards Paddock Hill Bend and go on to take race victory in race number 2? The red lights are on, revs are going to be rising. The red lights go out any second now, and away they go. And again, as we almost proved from the real-life theory, look to those Senior also going to get a much better launch than the Matthew Lewis. He does dart out to the outside line to go into Paddock Hill Bend, but it's Lewis who has the whole shot, and he leads the way up Hellwood Hill towards Druids for the first time. So Lewis has his nose in front, Senior in second place. It's all action stations already for third, because David McConaughey is just ahead of a spin for Tom Willis. I think there was contact with Cherny over that spot. So unfortunately, Willis has gone tumbling down the order to what looks to be 13th place. Actually, James Fowler, my apologies. James Fowler, he was the one who was up there. So sadly, Fowler's gone towards the tail of the field after that contact. And Cherny is in 4th position. Van, he's up to 5th. And after very lightning starts, look at that. McMaster, Rowe and Murphy are up to 6th, 8th and 9th already off the start. And they're hounding poor Guy Crawford who's just trying to hold on to the position as best he can. So apart from the small tag, a very frantic but relatively clean first lap of this race, Chris. But already a challenge for the lead once again from Senior.
Yeah, concentration levels now going to count if who's got the stamina to keep that going. Clearly these two look like they want to keep it going. Harry Senior up the inside there, actually got a better move there and manoeuvred Matthew a little bit wide, so he's got that move done this time. And we've got Blair also sort of ready to shove his nose in whenever he gets that opportunity.
Blair looking particularly impressive in this opening lap or so, to keep with the top two, and I suspect he may well have the pace here to keep with them, particularly if they carry on fighting like this. So through Surtees, all over the curve, and then up towards Clearways, which is the first part of this sequence, then McLaren right at the top of the hill, and then the kink just before them. That's Clark Curve. Now watch out for Jaroslav Cherny. If he can try and close up to these three, he will. And also he looks like he will bring the Belgian sim racer Tim Van Hee with him. Down the pit straight to the outside, into Paddock Hill bend comes Matthew Lewis. Just trying to sweep through for an undercut, which he's looking for, and he may well get, if he's got enough momentum to pull himself up Halewood Hill, and then dive to the inside at the apex at Druids. He has got there, Senior has to recognise he's there and give him room. And Lewis actually goes all over the curb and maintains second place, but now he's under severe threat from Blair McConaughey, who in turn, the trio, are being caught by the duo behind them of Cherny and Vanny. So the two effectively sim racers behind them, Chris, are starting to show what they can do against some of the regular Caterham runners in real life.
It's great to see that kind of crossover, and a lot of guys race simulators because they can't necessarily afford to get out there and do it in real life, so this is their opportunity to show what they're capable of. In the first race, Harry Senior and Matthew Lewis kind of worked together almost and had the opportunity when Dave made his tried to make a move up the inside. They got their gap, but they haven't got it as comfortable this time. So anytime they do their side-by-side racing, they are going to be costing themselves time, and they're going to bring all these other drivers into the mix.
But of course, at the same time, they're going to be entertaining quite a few of us. And again, whoops, in the background, there's been a few cars gone off the road. One of them is Steve McMaster, sadly. The other one's David Groves. Out of trouble, Kenny, unfortunately. I think James Murphy was in there as well. Well, Murphy's up to sixth. Well, he was up to sixth position. It's changing rather quickly on the timing pylon. Meanwhile, we look back to the leaders, and it's all action here because Senior's got back into stadium a lead, and third place. Those side by side and banging wheels there. McConaughey and Jaroslav Cherny got elbowed out onto the grass. He's now lost a position to Van Hee, or he did for a moment, because back up the inside goes the Czech driver on the Belgian, and back up to fourth position. So you look away for a second from the front, Chris, and they'll kick off.
Yeah, this race almost exploded, didn't it? With the mistakes going down into Paddock Hill. Looked like two cars may have touched and therefore sent themselves into the gravel. And then the ripples that fly backwards through the field. Obviously, a couple of other drivers also getting caught out with that. And then, at the same time, the side-by-side racing we talked about up the front is now meaning that all this top sort of 6 cars here, I think it's 6, maybe even 7. No, it's 5, I can't count. They're having a great old battle.
What's interesting is that there is a bit of a gap at the moment. It's exactly about 7.5 seconds, but usually if the gaps are a bit closer, and you've experienced this in real life, but I've seen it so many times from the commentary box, is that you get one group of cars, and particularly Caterhams, the 3 cars that will start to battle, and then another group of 3 or 4 cars will start to close in on them and make it a group of 7, then another group of 3 will join the back of them to make it 10, and before you know it, after a few laps, half the field's in one group at the front. I think the biggest one I saw was, at Silverstone last year, when we had, out of the 30-car field, we had 27 of them were all in one group together for the entire race, which I've never seen before. It looked like Caterham's version of NASCAR rather than sports car racing. But Matthew Lewis, back to the virtual world for a second, has set the fastest lap with a 52.0. But I have to say again, you're absolutely right. All this battle is only costing them time because they can't shake Blair McConaughey. Meanwhile, behind them, I don't think Van Hee and Cerny are too concerned by the lead now. They're more concerned with each other, battling over fourth place.
I think they have got that little gap now, which maybe means, he may take a couple of corners and just sit there and wait for that gap to develop. Certainly, if he was the long player, that's what he'd do. Now, I'm sure I'll be proved wrong at any second now, but nevertheless, if I was sat now, I would be considering waiting until that gap develops, so then I can know that I can really attack without worrying about what's going on behind.
Hopefully, these two won't have to worry about what's going on behind too much, because they've got a 7.5 second advantage over the next car up the road, which is currently Steve Arnell, although he's being chased down pretty rapidly, looking at the gaps by, this rapid lot. Look at this. You've now got Steve Arnell, who found himself under threat from Fowler and Murphy and Rowan McMaster for the quicker drivers in the championship. And poor Steve Arnell is trying to keep out of the way of making any contact, but all he's done in the process is open the door for one car to get through. hasn't been quite 2 or more, hasn't opened the floodgates just yet, but you just sense being caught in the middle, Chris, that all these guys are hungry to get some kind of a result, and poor Steve Barnell just trying to get on with his race. He's being assaulted from all sides.
Yeah, I guess he got through the middle of that spin and an incident where these guys didn't. So like you say, they are now hounding the rear end of Steve to try and get back through and see what they can do later in the race. Again, races are never over just because of the sheer number of mistakes. Dave trying to get that inside again on that overlap. He's clearly got some speed coming out that corner. Bit of a wobble there. Will James Murphy make the most of that?
Try to get through in the slipstream. Just quickly, one car we've lost, sadly, is Chris Bates. He's out of the race, I'm afraid. So no more Chris Bates in the multicoloured BMW art car style machine. That was Steve Arnell trying to dive up the inside of James Fowler. All he's done is succeedingly elbowed him out the way. Then David Rowe gives him a kiss, as then does Steve McMaster. Round goes Fowler, and unfortunately he's been punched out of the way by at least 3 cars. And we'll feel a bit hard done by after that one. It all started from whatever happened between himself and Steve Arnell. Meanwhile, these two again, who can't leave each other alone, Lewis and Senior, have now been caught again by Blair McConaughey, and now Senior's run deep at the middle of the apex of McLaren. It puts Lewis on his inside line unless Senior squeezes him towards the pit wall. Lewis is trying to pull alongside in the side draft here, but be careful for the pair of them, because here comes McConaughey. He'll get the toe from at least one of them on the run towards Paddock Hill Bend, and the 3 of them punch down through the Sadev sequential gearbox into Paddock Hill Bend. Now Lewis has got the inside run. He's going to look for the lead, but can McConaughey follow him through? Oh, don't go 3 wide boys into Paddock Druids. That's never going to work. And McConaughey dives up the inside, makes contact wheel to wheel with Lewis, squeezes up for second place, tries to edge him out wide, but he realises Lewis will have the inside line for the next corner at Graham Hill Bend at the bottom of the hill. Back into second place he goes. Now look at Tim Vanhey. He says, hey, can I play boys too? Oh, this looks like fun. 4 of them together for the lead now, and if Sergey can get off the back of them, it's going to be a quintet for the lead with just over half the race to go.
It never works, so I'm surprised we've still got them all facing in the same direction. A little bit of wheel tapping, but it was sidewall to sidewall, which is kind of the safest form of wheel tapping you get. Absolutely, Blair sort of manoeuvred himself in. I thought he was going to stay there and do a blocker, but actually he decided he was going to make it 3 wide, and it kind of paid off for him a little bit, but now it has dropped him back in the long run, back to 3rd again. But nevertheless, the battle is ongoing and relentless again.
Certainly is, and I think Senior wants to make it 1 wide rather than anything else wide at the front of the field. He's then going to try and defend from Lewis, who's determined to go for that outside line, but he gets oversteer on the exit, trying to get the power now to stay in parallel with Senior on the exit. Doesn't quite make it. He's back in there, but a nice little exit from Graham Hill Bend might set him up for Surtees, and Senior initially tried to shove him onto the grass, thinks, no, I'm a better driver than that, and tries to hold on to the position for the time being. And now Blair McConaughey fancies to go at second place again. Van He's now sailed up to the 3 cars, and Shirley's not too far away either. So here comes the train, all through Clark Curve and onto the Jack Brabham straight again. It's still Senior who leads the way, but for how much longer? Because Senior and McConaughey and Van He and Cherney are all in the mix. As here comes the Senior, who's now going to be possibly passed around the outside by Lewis if he dares. Lewis gets over onto the curb and now allows McConaughey a chance to get up the inside, but he in turn's under threat from Vandy. Back into Druids once again. A little bit of a wheel tap there from Lewis as he runs wide. McConaughey goes back up the inside for second. But again, Lewis has the inside line for Graham Hill Bend, slots back in front, and back into second place he goes. And what could be interesting now is that if Lewis gets too preoccupied by the cars in front, behind him, Chris, might just give Senior the advantage here. So Lewis, crucially, has to pretty much split his attention both ways. He has to try and keep Senior within touching distance of a toe to try and get past him again for the lead. But at the same time, he's got 3 very hungry drivers behind, trying to get into that position to try and win the race themselves. He's got lots of a 50-50 attention split that can't be
driving in the mirrors
driver.
is another skill, especially when you're driving in the front and the mirrors. It's hard. What you will see, and I think we are seeing already, is a tactic where by putting yourself side by side with the car in front, you are actually giving a bit of a defensive tactic, because it's very hard for someone to go all the way around the outside of all of you. So sometimes you will see cars go side by side round Druids and even around some other bends here, just to make sure that there's no room for another car to make use of the extra speed that they will be carrying.
Well, speaking of extra speed, Senior didn't quite carry as much as Lewis did on the exit of Graham Hill Bend, and he's right underneath him once more as they turn up through Surtees and into McLaren in clearways for the umpteenth time with about 4.5 minutes to go. Meanwhile, the third is kicking off. We've still at Blair McConaughey has lost third place to Tim Vanhey. He might be about to lose 4th now to Jaroslav Cherney, because he's now got the toe from Vanhey in front. McConaughey thinks, no, I've got a little bit better straight line speed, and then side by side again for the lead into Paddock Hill Bend. Lewis wants to go around the outside. He's taken the high wide handsome route, but he stays on the outside line and gets sideways on the exit over the AstroTurf. How he caught that, I'm not sure. These are very quite nimble and grippy cars anyway, but they can get very nervous at times if you push them to the limit. Lewis very lucky not to lose the back end of the car there, with some great reflexes to catch the slide in the middle of Paddock Hill Bend at the bottom of the hill. And Lewis is certainly not finished here, using all the curve on the exit and still staying with Senior. But you can tell Lewis is pushing, Chris, because that was full on sideways at the bottom of Paddock Hill Bend, and he was very lucky to catch that and not be collected by the onslaught of cars behind him. We're still battling over third place and over fifth.
Your tyres are screaming at the bottom of Paddock Hill Bend there. They're absolutely on the edge of the limit, and then if you touch the dirt like we saw that, I can tell you it's extremely easy to lose the rear end, so great job. And he's still right back in there. It's not like it cost him any time either, which is unbelievable.
Well, speaking of time, just under 3.5 minutes to go as still the lead goes on. They are still going at it for third place behind because Blair McConaughey cannot keep Cherney at bay. But Cherney's got past a pair of them. He's got past Van Hee in that sequence and then McConaughey. So Jaroslav Cherney's up to third place when he started the evening in the B grid, winning both races, and then from the back of the grid in grid A in the first race earlier on. So incredible stuff for Jaroslav. I don't even want to attempt he could even win this race. Something happens between the pair of them, but that might be a far-fetched prediction. But there is less 3 minutes to go. We've seen just about anything happen in these series, so we'll be tempted. What has happened though? Lewis back up the inside of Senior. He's got through. So Senior made a mistake up the apex of McLaren curve. Straight through back into the lead goes Matthew Lewis. So Senior then back to second place. And now it's his turn to be the hunter rather than the hunted as they come into Paddock Hill Bend again. And as we said, Chris, just that small lapse of concentration has cost Senior the lead. And now he hasn't got that much time now to get back on terms with him with about less than,
yeah, we
3
didn't
laps
see
to
the
go
actual
also.
move, but it's very easy to lose the rear end there. But obviously they were running very closely together, so it's hard for us to call exactly what happened. But regardless of what happened, he has now got just about half a second or 0.6 of a second to make up. And remember, the tow is really only good in these simulator for about half a second, so he's outside that zone. He's going to have to get his head down to see whether he can get back to him within the 2 minute gap. Matthew, I'm sure, will be working hard to not let that happen.
Oh, he's not going to make that gap, getting sideways on the exit there. I'm not sure if that's maybe just a little bit of frustration creeping in for Harry after losing the lead, and he's now got these fallen back to just almost 3/4 of a second. So when he hasn't fallen back in third place, it's still Blair McConaughey. He wants that final spot on the podium, and he'll try and prize it from Cherney if he can, and Cherney might have been sold a dummy here as he gets over the curve, sweeps back to the inside line to try and defend the place, but he has to give McConaughey the racing room as they come into Druids. He's not out of this. He takes the wide line into Druids to try and get the undercut, the best slingshot off the corner. Now as they tumble down towards Graham Hill Bend again, Cherney just holding on. I have to sense after that mistake and possibly some frustration setting in, as I mentioned, I think this might have been the last opportunity for Harry Senior to get back past, because the lead is back up to over a second now, and Lewis seems to be, at the moment, touch wood, fairly clear away from them as they come towards the start of what I think should be the last lap of the race, I think, unless they can get across just before they hit about roughly 52 seconds or so. It's going to be close, but across the line they go. We might have 2 more laps to go because Nicky crossed the line with 53 seconds rather than 52, so it's going to be pretty tight. 52.0 was the last lap for Lewis, so maybe this and 1 more lap, but means that Cherney has to hold on for at least 2 more laps. And now Cherney runs wide on the exit, McConaughey straight onto that one, pounces, and now Cherney locks up towards Druids. Up the inside goes Van Hee, so in the space of 1 move there, 1 mistake from Cherney again, 1 slip from Cherney, 1 little bit of lapse of concentration, and he's gone from a podium place down to the bottom of the top 5.
Absolutely, shows what the margins of this are. He just dropped his wheel onto the exit of Paddock, and that was it. The sequence of events had already started. This is going to be incredibly close as to whether this is going to be the last lap or not. Let's see as they go across the line, but we might have to call this very quickly, or we might have a whole lap to go.
Let's see, 2, 1, does he get to the line before the flag? Yes, he does, only just, so just like it was in race 1. So Lewis doesn't quite win the race just yet. He's got 1 more lap to go to hold on for this point. 1.2 miles of the Brands Hatch Indy circuit. They're still not finished for 4th position because our 2 sim racers in the mix, Cherney and Van Hee, are going at it now for 4th and 5th. But McConaughey could be on course, it looks as though, his first podium in either series here. McConaughey certainly has been improving in pace quite a lot since he joined a couple of race meetings ago. I think it was Thruxton in the 420Rs, I think before that, in fact. Regardless, here's the man who really has been on form tonight. He had to really work hard for it, and Senior will certainly might feel a little bit Disappointed that he lost out on 2 victories, but 2 second places is still very strong. But the man who's going to come away from tonight with 2 race victories to add to his total is going to be Matthew Lewis. He really had to get his elbows out, but it's all worked out in the end. Lewis does the double at Brands Hatch in the 420Rs. Senior gets second. It is Blair McConaughey on the podium in third, but a shout out has to go to Jaroslav Cherny and Tim Van Heat for fourth and fifth. David Rowe, a very silent race for him, but he recovers to sixth. It is 7th for Steve Arnell, 8th for Steve McMaster, then 9th for Gavin Crawford, and a rather off-form night for James Murphy. He will not be happy with 10th position at the end of that race. 11th goes to James Fowler. He was up there as well, but he had an earlier spin after tagging the gravel. 12th place for Dominic Mansberger. We have Mark Bennett and Peter Marsh across the line in 13th and 14th. Peter Marsh does very well. He was one of the drivers who was, if I'm correct, he was competing in one of the B grid races, I think. No, he was. Well, his first debut races was a couple of races ago, so he's certainly getting up to speed in A group pretty quickly. Andy Lees is 15th, and Paul Fernerhuff in 16th place, and unfortunately Tom Willis pitted in the closing stages, and we also lost Chris Bates early on. So, after 2 very exhausting races and another exhausting 15 minutes of Caterham action, Matthew Lewis again does the double of victories here at Brands Hatch, and he won by almost 2 seconds from Harry Senior, who we think possibly faded off a little bit. He's getting a bit frustrated after his errors that cost him the lead. Blair McConaughey will be delighted with his first podium. Jaroslav Cherny, one of the drivers of the evening, from the B grid from winning both races to the back of grid A, to 6th in race 1, and then to 4th and possibly even a podium in that second race. What a performance for him on his first time out. I think he's definitely earned his licence one way or another. I think I have to admit that. Tim Van Heat rounds out the top 5. Good run from the Belgian sim racer. David Rowe goes to 6th. Steve Arnell, Steve McMaster, Guy Crawford and James Murphy all a little bit off the pace, or not really where they wanted to be back in 10th. James Fowler could have had more, but ends up 11th. Dominic Mansberger is 12th. Then Bennett 13th from Marsh, Lees, Fernerhuff, Willis and then Bates. We lost Willis in the closing stages and Chris Bates early on after only a couple of laps. And breathe, because that was 2 very intense races all evening. Hopefully if you're watching either back the live broadcast back or watching on the stream, you thoroughly enjoyed that. I think me and Chris certainly did. That is typical Caterham racing at its finest, and of course now we are on the home straight towards the last 2 weekends. In fact, the final race meeting of both series. There's no points on offer, but if there were, it would hopefully certainly be quite a showdown. What do we say about it, Chris? Well, then that was exhilarating stuff from start to finish. Lots of battles, plenty of action for the lead, but in the end, it was one man that took both pieces of virtual silverware, and it was Lewis again getting the better of Senior in an environment where both of them looked incredibly evenly matched.
Nothing between them, was it? I have no idea how you do analysis on a race like that. There was so much going on at every single corner of every single lap. You can't pull out the move of the race because they were just, every single lap was a different thing. I just want to reiterate that the amount of concentration to get that done is brilliant. So thank you to all the racers, and thank you for everyone who's watching at home and hopefully enjoying and the streams that we're putting on, and please do keep returning. It's great to put on this show for you.
I'm seeing a few apologies in the Discord chat popping up from drivers, Paul Fernerhuff and I think also David Rowe as well, so might be 1 or 2 contact there that wasn't obviously wasn't none of it intended, but of course some people feeling a bit sorry for themselves after some of the incidents in the mix, but further back. But Jaroslav Cherny certainly getting 1 or 2 plaudits, and certainly getting some congratulations from him for his actions. I think it's time for you to delve into the Discord servers, Chris, and go and find us a couple of the drivers to have a chat to, because I'm sure there'll be a few if they're around which might have a couple of things to say about what's gone on tonight. 2 very entertaining races. I'm sure plenty of drivers with a word or 2 about what they got up to.
Blair McConaughey in it to see what he thought from his podiums tonight.
I reckon so. Yes, third place for him, and a good effort nonetheless. So good stuff.
Blair,
yeah, let's have a chat to him.
Maybe not on audio today. Just give him a quick. Oh, here he is.
I was just about to say, I was disappointed I was going to quiz him on his Nürburgring lap, but we'll get to that in a second, I suppose. Blair, congratulations tonight. 2 fantastic results and a fantastic appearance on the podium in both races. You've really stepped up in pace in the 420Rs. I would ask how that went, but of course I'm sure anything less than crazy probably wouldn't do suffice, I think. Just how was that out there?
The first race was absolutely phenomenal. Dicing with James, I think I said in the chat, I've never actually had a race that I can remember that was as exciting as that in real life or virtual. I'm not really sure where my pace has come from, because I wasn't really matching the guys earlier on. I can only imagine that living up in Aberdeen is just slightly cooler, and I've got the competitive advantage for being in a cooler room.
Yeah, cooler room means a cooler PC, which means better performance. We know how it works with engines. It seems to work with PCs as well. So obviously going forward, we've got one more round to go at Donington Park. Are you expecting some of that form to carry on? Is it a circuit that you enjoy and you're familiar with?
I'm reasonably familiar with it. I was actually down there with a track day with White Academy champion Tom earlier in the year, and we were both showing pretty good pace. So it's a circuit I quite like, and yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Excellent stuff. Are you going for at least another podium to round off the season, hopefully?
I'll try, but might be this might be a high of my season, but yeah, we'll see how it goes.
It's quite strong competition. Chris, any
I
questions?
just wanted to. Well, I'm interested to know how your nerves are after that. We were talking on the stream how it's kind of relentless, and the concentration levels needed are really high. So I was wondering how you're feeling after those 2 sessions.
You're absolutely right. There's just absolutely no stopgap. There's no kind of respite. You've always got someone, even when you're attacking, you've got someone behind you. Your heart rate's racing. It's about as good a feeling as you can get compared to real life racing. Yeah.
Congratulations, manic. And hopefully we'll speak to you on the podium again soon.
Cheers, Cheesy. Thanks.
Okay. Should we hear from? Do you want to hear from the other podium steps?
If they're around, absolutely. Yes, if you can get them in, and maybe not probably at once, because they might have some conversations about some of the racing. But let's see who you can grab and see if we can get him from who's around
Matthew,
in the top 2. Absolutely.
Maybe not, unless he's got push to talk activated. Here we go. Hello. Ooh, it looks like we're struggling for audio with Matthew. I think we'll have to give you a chance next time, Matthew. But congratulations, and let's get Harry in here then. Let's hear his part of that. So, hi Harry, have you got us some commentary?
Yeah, I'm here.
Chris,
I'll take this one. Yeah, Harry, we didn't actually see what happened on that final sort of section of the last lap there to see how Matthew got in front, whether it was a slight tail out moment or whether there was a slight nudge involved.
No, I just made a mistake. I just got too deep in the brakes and went wide, and he saw the opportunity, threw up the inside. Fair play to him. He was quicker in both races by a country mile. I was basically sat in his toe all of the first race to stay with him, and second race I was just holding him up. I mean, if being honest, he deserved both wins, so congratulations to him. I'm chuffed with second because I was not doing well in practice throughout yesterday and today, so I'm actually quite surprised.
The lap times were certainly there. You dipped into the 51s, and I think that's a pretty stellar lap time no matter what. I guess just congratulations. I know you said you weren't feeling up to pace, but nevertheless you put on a great show and showed how you defend and attack around this corner, around this track.
Yeah, it's a shame I made the mistake in the second race, because I pretty much had him behind me the entire race. I felt I was really, really calm, kind of just in the zone. I don't even, you could ask me about particular moves, I wouldn't remember. It's all kind of turned into a blur. I was just sort of in the zone, not getting over flustered or anything, trying not to let the pressure build up, but I still made a mistake.
Yeah, and then after that mistake, we saw you have a sort of a rear slide with the wheel as you were trying to accelerate out of Surtees, and it looked not of Surtees, out of the final bend, and it looked like you might have given up at that point and just settled in for that second place.
Yeah, I spent so long. I mean, how long was the race? 15 minutes. I'd spent 12 of it defending, sitting on apexes, parking it. That as soon as Matthew got ahead, he was off, and I'm sat behind him now, and I'm I've completely forgotten how to drive the track. I'm taking all the corners way too slowly. And then it got really close at the line. I thought that the penultimate lap was the final lap. And honestly, coming up to the line, I completely lifted off. And as I looked up for the flag, and the flag wasn't there, and I lost about half a second then. So, I mean, I think he won by almost 2 seconds in the end. So
oh well, next time out then we've not got too long to wait for the next rounds, but they are the final rounds of our initial race series. Any particular favourite? We've got the Academy and the 420s around Donington.
Yeah, I love Alton in the Academy. That's the one I'm looking forward to. I've kind of, being honest, I've had enough of this 420. It doesn't handle very well. We were just talking about it in the other channel about possibly changing the setups, but we'll mention that in the Discord later. But I'm looking forward to Alton. I love Alton. Best race result in real life was at Alton in the 310Rs, so I can't wait to go there.
Anything from you, Scott?
No, it's just been good to see you back on form once again, and it must have been pretty exhilarating for several laps going side by side with Lewis. It must be on a circuit like Brands Hatch. I imagine from the driver's point of view, it must get pretty tricky at times when you're getting sort of almost edged out onto the edge of the track or having to push someone to the edge of the track to try and defend them. So it must be pretty. At times you must almost be gritting your teeth, thinking just either please don't go up the inside or kind of just please stay where you are and don't make any contact. It must be pretty tricky at times.
Yeah, it was quite exhilarating, but I think we both kind of knew where each other was going each lap, and we didn't make hardly any contact. I mean, it got like we were pushing each other out a lot, but it wasn't. I never thought I or he crossed the line once, so I'm really happy with the race. It was really enjoyable.
It almost seems like there's a bit of telepathy going on between you and Matthew. Wherever you are on track, you sense know where you are, sort of in the vicinity to kind of not make contact. It seems to be like that because you on track you seem to be fairly close between each other in both Academy and 420 are on several occasions, so you're both fairly evenly matched by the looks of it.
Yeah, it's always great racing with him, and if I see him like next to me, I know there's a very low chance of me getting bashed into, unlike some other drivers.
Good stuff. Well, go and prep for Alton, but well done for 2 second places. Very hard fought, but you have earned them. So go and chill out for the weekend, and we'll see you on Monday.
Cheers, guys.
Oof. And relax.
Great stuff. Yeah, I think we just saw a glimpse of Dr. Palmer's helicopter there. So even if he was watching virtual or not, hopefully he enjoyed that as well. And sorry if we've ruined any of your grass. Anyway. Moving on to what is effectively the end of the broadcast, and let's just quickly remind everyone of where we're heading to. And there's not long left now, as Chris mentioned. We only have the final races of both series coming up, and they kick off June. And of course, it's incredible to think we've had a whole season's worth of racing almost, and we haven't even gone racing in real life just yet. But there is where and what you can see racing. The Academy Series heads to its final venue, Alton Park. A favourite for Harry Senior, so he could be a dark horse and certainly a favourite for victory if fortunes play out in his favour. Alton Park on the 1st of June, again at 8:20, and there'll be three more races for second race for Grid B to decide the driver who joins the back of Grid A, and then 2 more races to round off the Academy season. As for the 420Rs, they head to a real driver's favourite for most of them in real life, Donington Park on the national circuit. And when Caterhams I always think that Donington is a circuit that was almost made for Caterhams, because whenever I've seen and commentated on Caterhams in real life there has never been a dull race on either the national or the Grand Prix circuit, and I'm expecting the 420Rs to deliver the same kind of action. 5th of June, next Friday, 20-8 once again for the 420Rs. And Chris, it's incredible to think that we've had 6 meetings now for both series, and we're already at the end of the season before we've even turned the wheel in anger in the championship for real. It seems pretty crazy, but I think you'll agree from start to finish we've had racing that really has been a real advert for not just people who want to take part in this series, but also people who might want to go and check out Caterham's when racing gets back underway in August.
The drivers you're seeing here are out on the motorsport grids. Get to those banks, get to those tracks as and when you're allowed to, based on the lockdown rules, and absolutely go and support them, because they do this week in, week out in the real championships as well. It is this good. So we'd love to see you in the banks and come say hello. There's also a great desire to carry on the simulator racing going forward as well by a lot of the drivers. So even when the real racing gets underway, they're finding the extra practice and training and whatever they're offered by this service is great, and more, and long may it continue. We hopefully going to continue that on through into the new seasons and beyond.
That sounds pretty good to me. I think just a quick reminder, I guess another reminder of where we're going. You're talking about filling the spectator bank just to round off. Just a reminder of where we're going. So if you are wanting to see, if with barring of course spectators being allowed, obviously during the circuit and government guidelines, obviously. But in terms of real life, as a reminder, for the Academy drivers, they start on July the 18th at Alton Park for their first round at the moment, and then Cadwell Park on the 1st of August for their second round, 23rd of August at Thruxton for round 3. A double header, as I mentioned earlier on, the first time I can remember it in personal memory, for 2 races on the same weekend for each Academy group. That will be at Brands Hatch on the 26th and 27th of September, and then the last championship round will be at Donington Park on the Saturday of that race weekend. But on the Sunday, drivers from both groups will come together into one big combined race, a non-championship race simply known as the Autumn Trophy. It's just bragging rights. Get out there, a 15-minute race, first past the post wins, and they get the trophy. And possibly the bragging rights going into 2021.
Just to interject at that point, Scott, I think the Autumn Trophy race, I could be talking out of turn, but I think the Autumn Racing Trophy will be run as road sport. So I think they're getting the opportunity to upgrade their car overnight. They get new tyres to play with and a new anti-roll bar at the rear of the car, but that's the only change between an Academy car and a road sport. So it could be, don't take it 100%, but I've certainly heard something along those lines.
That'd be quite cool. We might give a bit of a head start towards 2021 for the Academy, because of course all the drivers that compete in the Academy series will then move on to the Road Sport series for the next season. It is very simple upgrades to make the car sort of road sport spec, as you mentioned, just a couple of tweaks in the way it goes. So potentially it could be their first racing road sport spec for those who are competing on the Sunday. Quickly for the rest of the series: Road Sport, 270R, 310R, and the cars you've seen on screen here tonight, which is, well, they are still 420R Caterhams, but it's called the 7 UK Championship because it has obtained UK national championship status from Motorsport UK, which is brilliant news. So they will start their season at Cadwell Park on August 1st and 2nd. Then they go to Thruxton on the 22nd and 23rd. Then to Brands Hatch at the end of September. Then they will also bit Donington Park on that round. But then where the Academy stops their season, the rest of the series go forwards into the mix. Just a comment on Discord that apparently says that the Autumn Trophy isn't.
Ignore everything I said.
I just caught Dominic Mansberger's message on Discord saying it wasn't, so I thought I'd just jump that in there just to make sure, because he's an Academy one. Whereas for the Road Sport, the season where it does end championship-wise for, as I was mentioning, for the Academy at Donington Park, it still carries on for the final race day of the season at Snetterton on the 31st of October. So even though it's on Halloween, hopefully we won't get any frightful driving standards, no pun intended. Of course it's intended, but there you go. So that's where you can catch Caterham Racing in real. We've told you where you can catch the last couple of rounds of both series in the sim. All that's left for us to say is that is pretty much it for the end of the broadcast. Enjoy what should hopefully be another warm weekend once again, and we will see you back here on Monday for the final Caterham Academy season race at Alton Park. Harry Senior says it's his favourite track and the one he's been looking forward to. Is it going to be 2 wins for him, or can the likes of Lewis, McMaster, Rowe, Murphy, or anyone else steal his thunder and take one of the final 2 race victories? From myself, Scott Woodwiss, from Chris Hutchinson, and all of us that's been racing and competing tonight, thanks for watching, and we will see you Monday. Have a great weekend, and bye for now.